Hello everyone. Welcome. How y'all doing today? We are here for just a little while, having a bit of a just chatting stream, but hopefully you're all tuning in, having a good time. Oh, Final Fantasy 17, I love it. Hello, good evening. It's good to see you all. So here's the plan for today. We I don't have a lot of time today, so rather than playing a game, we're just gonna have a just chatting stream. But there's also not been any like hot drama in the history community, beyond the things that are perpetually true. So instead, what I want to do is I want to take an hour or so here and just like talk to you all about sort of reflecting on where we're at as we just hit that milestone of 3,000 Twitch followers. And also, finally set some proper objectives for going forward. Like, what do we as a community want to accomplish? Because it's me as a streamer, but also us as a community. Uh, so, the idea is we're kind of going to do a tour of the channel a little bit, get to hang out, and get to talk about what some of those goals. So, I suppose let's just like get into it with a very warm hello to everyone. My name is Adam, and this is Ludo History. Notably, that distinction actually matters. I am not Ludo History, I am Adam. I just happen to run Ludo History, and right now I'm the only person involved with it. We'll circle that back around to that to the very end, but that was, as we also rolled out the new branding, which is still awesome. Thank you, AC, for making that. Right, part of the goal is to distinguish between Ludo History, the project, and Adam, the streamer, because previously it was a version based on my face, and, while it was very good, and I'm extremely grateful to Red for making it, it just didn't really reflect where I want to go and what I think matters about this channel. So, we kind of want to reevaluate that, and as we start thinking long term about what we're working towards, I think reasonably make the change. How did I choose the name? So it is a crappy multilingual portmanteau. Ludo, you can either read in two ways. It's either the Latin verb I play, or it is a ablative form of the Latin noun ludus, game. So it's either I play history, or it's history through a game. And either way, it winds up being, in my opinion, potentially slightly too clever. But, right, it sums up the goals of the channel quite well. Because we primarily do play games and think about game narratives critically, but through doing that, right, apply historical training and historical expertise and cultural heritage methods to better understand the media and how it affects the world we play in. So that was kind of when I was pitching games, brainstorming ideas for it, that one really stood out as one that quite succinctly captures what the channel tries to do. It also is something that's not like too arcane, because most people have heard of like ludonarrative dissonance, which I think is a fairly nonsense term most of the time. There's a very small set of games where I think that term's meaningful, and a much larger set of games where it's completely pointless. But weirdly, the example in the article that came up with the term is actually, I think, a bad example. Who is it? Is it Epson Orseth that pitches the term ludonarrative dissonance? Or is it... Oh, heck. It's one of the big names. I don't remember which one. It's that first... ludonarrative dissonance was proposed... Oh, it was actually Clint Hawking, who was the creative director at LucasArts. Okay. Huh. Interesting. Uh, anyway, right. Hawking uses it originally to talk about Bioshock, with the idea that, oh yeah, right, this whole time you've been kind of strung along, strung along, strung along. Then, after the climax of the game where you're supposedly free to start making your own choices, you continue to just be strung along. Because that's what the level design demands. Right, so after Fontaine, you know, it's a 2007 game. I'm gonna just spoil it. After Fontaine reveals himself, and you supposedly break free of the programming of the Would You Kindlies, uh, there's only one level left in the game really at that point. First, but secondly, right, that would be a moment. Oh, you could make any decision theoretically, and yet the only decision the player actually has available is to follow what Tannenbaum wants and to go fight Fontaine. For Hockney, that is like a case where what the narrative says is now available and what the gameplay says is now available are so radically different that it like ruins the immersion of the game and breaks the narrative. I actually think that's a bad example because I think the narrative does a lot to set up the idea that realistically the only thing left to do is to get the fuck out of Rapture so you can actually start living your life. And the only way to get out of Rapture is to beat up Fontaine to get to the escape hatch. Right, I think the game does plenty of work to set that up. And so the fact that that's the only option available is, well, alright. Sure, it was the thing I was going to do anyway. Oh no. Tragic. So I actually think it's a bad example. I think Bioshock Infinite is a much better example of having pretty vague ludonarrative difference. Exactly, the game ends. The game just ends at the moment where you actually escape Rapture. So it's like, yeah, of course ludonarrative dissonance, like the ludonarrative dissonance ends when the narrative ends. Because the freedom for Jack to go live their life and do whatever is a freedom that does not require a player. And so the actual interesting story has ended, and so they just move on. But yeah, right, there are games to which that's definitely like a super meaningful term. The more cinematic, right, the more filmic the game is trying to be, the more impactful the idea of ludonarrative dissonance actually is. But generally, I think it's a bit goofy. It is a term that's familiar, but as like an analytical concept, I don't think it really does a whole lot for you. Like, I don't think it really helps us a whole lot in treating games with nuance, and learning from them. Like, I don't think it's a useful tool to help us reach that goal most of the time. Anyway, so that's where the name comes from, having gone on a big tangent. Right, it is Ludo, as in ludonarrative dissonance, as in Aladdin borrowing, and then history, because I'm a historian, we're looking at history. Which, by the way, I suppose that's the other part of it. To anyone who's, like, just tuned in the last few months, to give, like, the full and proper introduction, like, I am almost entirely, and entirely too far, immersed in academic and graduate level historical training. I have a master's degree in Viking and Medieval Norse Studies from the University of Iceland, and I have a master's degree in Cultural Heritage Studies from Simmons University. So I have 2 graduate degrees in thinking about the past and its impact. I'm also a published academic in one high-profile journal, with a second article coming out in an edited volume later this year, in game studies and the historical reception of games and myth. I am on the organizing committee for a couple of major conferences, or a major strand of a conference, with that, hopes of being more involved soon. Uh, and so on top of all of this, I've done work in environmental history, uh, in cultural heritage exhibit design, and basically, right, I've been working in history and its closely related fields for a good long while now, and like to imagine, at least when it comes to my niches of environmental history, reception studies, and medieval history, that I have a pretty high degree of expertise coming into it. So that's where the history part of it comes in, is that that's how I think about everything I do. Of that, turns out when you start doing, when you've done history for 10 years of an otherwise not very long life, you kind of start seeing everything as through historical lenses. And so that's like a feature of the channel, not a bug. Right? The idea is we play anything that can be loosely classified as historical, as a historical game, or branching out potentially into other media, uh, anything that we can classify as historical, take a look at the influences, where it comes from, what it's drawing on, and then from that be able to better understand the way that we imagine our past. So, that's kind of the pitch, the elevator pitch for the channel, and for what we're doing. And so, to that end, right, thus far, I think we've really laid good foundations to kind of reach that goal. Uh, so let's click over to the other page here for a little bit of PowerPoints. I know, just the most exciting content you could ever think of. PowerPoint presentations. Boom. So, God, the new logo is just so good. Look how nice it is. Anyway, what I want to start off with here, right, is the idea that as we think about where we want to go, and I say we deliberately here, for reasons that will become clear in just a second, I imagine the channel long term in much less of like streamer framework within the culture dominant on online creative spaces, and much more akin to what I've been trained in, which is cultural heritage institutions. Right? Like, that's what I primarily think of is cultural heritage institutions. And to that end, right, the community server has things that, as far as I know, no other Discord server actually has. But instead of having, like, rules and just being a community space and then the creative side is on its own thing, we actually have, like, an institutional mission and values. So, the current mission statement for Ludo History is we seek to explore how the past and the present intertwine and affect modern history making through nuanced collaborative discussion and analysis of historical materials and media, especially video games. Right. Chat, do you think that sums up the... This is a collective endeavor, right? Y'all are part of this discussion, that's why you're on screen as there. As the other person. Right, instead of it being just me on camera, you're also there, you're also around. Right, to some meaningful extent, you'll get to participate in this, because this is also your, part of your spaces, and we want to make that happen. So, this is what we came up with, just over a year ago, as the institutional mission for the channel. I don't know. Do you all think that this still works? I am Ludo History. No, I am Ludo History. No, I am Ludo History. Something like that, yes. We are all Spartacus, except we are all Ludo History. Right. I think this is still good. I think this highlights a lot of very important aspects of the mission, right? Nuance. Oh, please don't. There we go. Nuance, right? The idea that we a core part of how this works to me is the idea that we can have difficult, complex discussions in nuanced ways, and we don't always manage to be nuanced, because sometimes just throwing a hot take into the wild is much more enjoyable. But generally speaking, right, what that means to me is the idea that we take our media seriously because it deserves to be taken seriously, and so we can actually think about that. The other thing that particularly stands out to me in it is the idea that it's collaborative, right? The idea that the channel is and should be a collaborative endeavor uh, is something I very strongly believe in, and I think makes the channel better. Uh, you'll, as we think back on the last year, we'll have that a bit later, but you'll see how that's kind of affected my decision making, and I want these decisions as we go forward to continue to come from that perspective, right? From the idea that getting other people's ideas and getting to work with other people is not only fun, but is actively fulfilling and creates a level of like something that matters, right? Of content that matters that is not possible if it's just me. So, our mission statement. Relatedly, we have values, right? Values are the way that we present the mission in a series of more actionable ideas, right? So these are our specific framework to achieve our mission. A perspective that is based first and foremost in good faith and kindness. That's based in, actually doing the work and bringing evidence to your discussions and letting that evidence and that semblance of not scholarly rigor, but of, effort and labor be respected, right? And so letting people's expertise shine through, and if someone is proving themselves to be an expert in something, to give them the space to go be passionate about the thing. And again, participation and collaboration. Well, everyone is of course welcome to sit around and lurk, right? I always have more fun in these conversations when we are all around, right? When we are all actively talking, asking questions, having a conversation. Like, it's pretty... I find that a lot more fun. I find that to be much better content. And I certainly hope you all agree. The exact language in here is formulated for the Discord server, but it applies to the channel page as well, right? We've actually had to do extremely little moderation, in terms of, like, people not being chill, because it feels like, as for our core community, there's a lot of buy-in on these ideas, right? And presenting them, right, letting them be visible, I think really does help shape a culture that works towards those goals sort of passively. And the reason I present this all now is, right, I work out of cultural heritage institution frameworks. That's what I have expertise in, that's how I work. And that's how my brain works. So the idea is come from cultural heritage institutions, right, is that your mission, the goals of the institution at large, are going to shape policies, which are going to shape decision making. So the values are kind of like our most generally phrased policies. And then from these, if we agree that these are worthwhile, if this is a worthwhile mission and values that accurately help us get to that mission, then from these we can start thinking about, like, what specifically are we trying to accomplish and try and create actionable goals that are going to help us achieve this mission. So, I want to look back on what's, like, we've done recently and how they kind of intertwine with the mission and values, right? Specifically, right, I think there's 2 games that stand out for us in terms of channel content. God of War Ragnarok, which just wrapped up last week, and our intermittent playthrough and then repeat playthrough of Pentiment. So God of War Ragnarok, right? What we did through that, the original pitch was that I was going to partner with Overly Sarcastic Productions, in order to be able to bring on academic guests who represent a diversity of perspectives, identities, and experiences within Norse academia, and then have conversations with them that are informed by what the game presents us, and in turn informs the audience, regardless of whether they're brand new to Norse mythology or have been doing it for a long time, gives them new tools to help understand what the game is doing and what it does. So, no spoilers, yep. I'm not spoiling what happens, but, right, that was the pitch of the playthrough, right, of that series of streams. And so we got, what, 7 guests on? Let's see, we had Luca, we had Felix, we had Luca, we had Lynn, we had Declan, we had Basil, we had Katie, and we had Claire. So yeah, we had 7 guests on over a period of roughly 3 months. And then I felt like some really good conversations. For folks who were actually in chat, I want to debrief and actually like have a little bit of a postmortem on it. How did y'all like that idea? Right? Do you think that worked? And were there any guests that you particularly liked, or moments that you felt like were super informative and interesting? Because, evaluation is an important part of the process, and we like evaluating and having meta reflections. I found chatting with Luca extremely fun. Luca and I work in the same material, and work in very similar frameworks. So being able to understand what he's doing with like creating a much wider corpus of references, it's very fun. Also note, this was, right, God of War Ragnarok, this playthrough was iterating on something we actually tried earlier. You like the sidebars talking about runes? That's fair. Right. How many people remember the New World streams, right? The Historians versus New World, experience. Don't know how else to call it, but it sure was an experience. Because that was in 2021 to 2022, so, a while ago now. New World was painful. Yep. But right, the God of War Ragnarok, right, was a verifiable time. Certainly one of the games. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it launched. New World launched in August of 2021, I think. That sounds right. So, yeah. Turns out it was actually a while ago. But yeah, right, we had a bunch of guests on during that, representing a bunch of different disciplines, and the most common piece of feedback I got from those streams was the idea of having guests on is great and super successful, and the game itself was extremely unappealing. So the idea was to sort of iterate on that process, right, using a much more appealing game, a game that I have much deeper subject expertise on, and then being able to sort of attempt a similar idea, but with a slightly narrower scope and with a slightly higher profile, and see how well it worked. And I unfortunately, right, one of my complaints with the God of War Ragnarok ones, as I think about it, is just that I wasn't really able to interact with you all as much as I would have liked. Certainly, I want to let the guest be the center of attention, right? Whenever there's a guest on, the stream is suddenly no longer about me. It's about the guest and being able to let their perspective and their dialogue inform the discussion and inform the content in ways that my perspective can't. Um, so to that end, right, if they just want to talk and don't want there's less chat interaction, that's sort of a necessary trade-off. But at the same time, I would have liked to have a little bit more interaction with chat, with you all, and be able to really make that a big giant seminar discussion rather than two people have an interview while some people watch. But I guess you'd like to add having a natural scientist evaluate AC Valhalla was fun. That was great. That was my. I think the only natural scientist I had on was my sister. My sister's great though, and is extremely good at what she does. So that was a great time. And remember the half hour spent on the geology of that one rock? Steph, was that the rock we got stuck inside with Sophie in New World, or was that a different rock? Or was that the 12 million year old basalt aqueduct? By the way, I can still break Bill Farley by just mentioning a 12 million year old basalt aqueduct. So, to the question of have they all recovered? No. No, they haven't. Because I can still break them so easily. God, I gotta find an excuse. It still causes me. It's still so good. God, that was a game that was extremely hard to extend good grace to, because every time we tried, it mashed it into the dirt. It felt a bit frustrating sometimes when the conversation was going one way, chat was pointing to point out stuff, and we'd only occasionally get noticed, and just kind of have like a sentence plucked out and have that be our stance. Exactly. That was the thing that there still is definitely room to iterate and improve on. Part of that, I think, the is an issue of since we weren't able to broadcast the gameplay live, and with guests who are sometimes less familiar with Twitch, between the setup, between guests who aren't super engaged with Twitch, and then just sometimes the conversation going wildly out into left field in God of War. It sometimes became just difficult for that to happen, and also, right, the audience size was much larger than normal, and so there was a lot more people talking, which also affects, it's a little bit harder to have that conversation, that little sort of small group hanging out, having a good time in our own little pub. Uh, right, it's a much larger group, and that inevitably makes chat interaction just a little bit harder, but it's something that, is totally valid feedback, and something I want to, make note of. Pros. Yeah, like you love the Steel Rising guest episode, and Steph agrees. Right, yeah, having Steel Rising was right. The fact that she agreed to do it was just a great time. Uh, Fantastic. Because you were again a very active part of the conversation. All right, so that's a super useful piece of feedback. Because, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? That checks out very nicely, right? That the point of participating and collaborating is that there's a reasonable expectation that you can be heard and we can actually talk about your opinions. And even if it ends up being like a, hey, super useful comment, there's some issues about it, scholarship's kind of moving this direction, that still's fine, right? That still is part of the job. And still is valuable participation. So, yeah, I think that is a helpful thing to know. Thank you. Let's see. The same thing, right? The other big game that I think highlighted the potential of the channel really nicely was Pentiment. Right. We're currently a very short distance into a second playthrough of Pentiment, which that's basically right doing the same thing as what we're doing with God of War and with New World before that, is get people with very different expertises in a game that there's a lot of love for, and then be able to have conversations around that. And so, like, having Ali on to talk about both Inculinati and Pentiment was a delightful experience for me. I think that worked super nicely. But also, having that, like, super duper tight conversation with Zoe Franznik as, like, the start of it, with, like, just an hour and a half, right? Super duper short stream as far as our big streams go. With Obsidian PR sort of helping organize it, and then being able to really have that super focused conversation about the game, right, was, to me, utterly joyful. And I have plans, right, I'm still trying to set some stuff up with some other folks to get a few more guests on with Pentiment, who sometimes have very unexpected expertise. Like, I'm trying to get Dr. Kate Cook on, who does classical reception. So, being able to think about, the underlayers of early modernity and that sort of extremely long delay of classical reception. Something I'm trying to set up still, but exactly. So, looking back though, I think the info, right, as we look honestly at all of the games, because there are a lot of them, and they are, some of them sure existed, some of them definitely existed. Hooray for Zoe, a goodest guest. Exactly, T-Chef, a goodest guest. God, what an excellent conversation, and has continued to be an absolute joy. I know Zoe just gave the keynote over at the Coding Medieval Worlds workshop, which is something I was involved in the last 2 years. Fortunately, wasn't able to be involved in this year, but gonna try and be on the organizing committee if James wants me to be for next year. Right, just she gave the closing keynote about Pentiment for that workshop, and it was apparently really good, and people walked away from that feeling really happy. So it was very delightful to help get that set up. But yeah, right, as we look at all these games, one thing that stands out to me is the games that chat seems to really enjoy, and that I seem to really enjoy getting a lot out of, are almost universally the ones that do history in interesting ways. Right? Chat, do you agree with this as we look at this? There's a couple of exceptions, right? Expeditions Viking is just not a very streamable game. It does some interesting historical things, but it was not a game that it seemed like people were particularly interested in watching. Which is fine, it happens. But if you flipped it with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that was a game people were super interested in watching, but was very generally a strange history experience. So, but I am noticing overall, right? There's generally speaking, the games people like to watch fall very heavily on this sort of the upper couple of tiers, right? That's why you think God of War improved from New World. I think the biggest thing that improved on is the idea that it's a better game. Uh, oh yeah, like Blackhaven performed super well, most certainly in the VODs. Uh, freaking Great Ace Attorney Chronicles worked great. Uh, People loved the big long streams of like Scabma and Inoa. Like shockingly high, people like hanging out for 7 or 8 hour streams for those ones. Don't know that I understand that, but you all do you. Um, I'm grateful for it. It's just that was a lot of time. The other question I had regarding guests, right? Regarding having other people on, chat, which one do you prefer? The sort of God of War Ragnarok, New World Pentiment style of that sort of um, rotating guest, right? So every week or every time we stream, there's a new guest on giving a different perspective. So you get this big breadth of alternative expertises. Or do you prefer something much more akin to Forgotten City, where Richard Cole joined us for the entire time? And having that sort of really long form conversation and engagement with one other perspective. Which of those actually feels more interesting, better, or is it a case where you want more of both? You know, more of both is a perfectly valid option. You like the rotation. Yeah, we've not had a lot of like super deep experiences with like co-commenters. Uh, right. We've had Forgotten City and we've had ones with OSP. See, you want ones where the guest is there more than once, but also there can be a rotating one. Interesting, interesting. So like JCDC, just to make sure like I understand what you're suggesting there better, it's much more like a very podcasty thing where there's maybe like two people involved for the entire game, and then you'll have a third person that's kind of cycling through, uh, and so you get a couple people who really know what they're doing, talking, playing around, hanging out, and then you maybe get some bonuses. Of different guests on. So, yeah. I guess for a couple weeks and then rotates, that would be an interesting idea. Ones where guests return like OSP or Wrath of the Druids. Wrath of the Druids is probably a great shout out for that, even though it all occurred at once. Even though we did it over 2 streams, two exorbitantly long streams, but that there was a core group of like 3 of us. It was what, me, Emmett, and Eleanor, and then Rachel and Meg and some other folks tuned in, kind of as they were available, and so we could have folks kind of hopping in and out and participating. That was a load of fun. Wrath of the Druids was like the first like hyper successful stream that we had. So you have like X amount of people and they're there more than once, so that the guest sees more than one location. Yeah, you know, that's something worth experimenting with. Let's look at that. Let's just do this. Um, um, I should not forget Luca came and joined us for all of God of War 2018. So, there's that. Uh, so, proposals, rotating guest cast, but they rotate every 2 weeks instead of every week. Interesting. Um, yeah, guests in the wings. Having guests in the wings is always an interesting thing. It's a thing that we maybe need. I need to just write up a better document for how that actually works. Because one thing that I've struggled with having guests in the wings, right? Just being like, hey, if you're free, quick hop in the voice chat here. You can say your piece and then go. Is that highlighting right? How that works so that there isn't this like awkward thing of, oh, am I done now? Should I leave? Is that weird? Um, it's something that doesn't necessarily feel comfortable for guests, right? I don't get the sense that it's like super duper comfortable. And it's something where, you know, if the conversation starts to move on, uh, right, when I highlight that expertise and then thank them for that, and then be able uh, say, all right, now we can go back to waiting in the wings for next time it shows up, right? And that's something when I super want to highlight those perspectives, but having that on voice and having the dynamics of like really trying to make that happen versus having people talking about it in chat and being able to move at their own pace is something that still needs some sort of sorting out. It's good to know that you like that though, right? It's super good to know that that is something you like and that you want. Kyra, you said you like that idea too. So, knowing that that's something that people like here are interested in, um, means that I can start thinking about how to write up some guidelines, some documentation for how that might actually work in a way that's comfortable for everyone. There's also the inevitable difficulty of, oh, we're not able to do a lot of the sound checks that we would normally do pre stream if someone just hops in. And so that always runs the risk of, oh, you're calling in from the other side of the world, and your internet craps out halfway through a sentence. Oops. Part of the live experience. Hardly game rate or hardly premise ruining, but is definitely something that we need to keep in mind. But yeah, that's super helpful and good. But generally speaking, right, is there anyone listening right now who wants fewer guests? That's a completely valid take. And if you're like, hey, we want to spend some time, especially in the short term, of right focusing in on streamer and chat, and kind of focusing on that part of the experience, and have fewer guests, for a while. Take a break from having guests. Totally fine. Do want to make sure that like if that's a thing you want, that we know that. Depends on the game. Interesting. And the like intended experience. Interesting. Do you want to elaborate on that? Because I'm curious as to what types of games you feel like really want guests, or much more interestingly, perhaps, what types of games really don't want guests. Yeah, like God of War, you had some foresight going in versus Pentiment, where we were all reacting together. Interesting. Steph is agreeing on this, that there are games that we're doing that really don't feel like they want another guest, and then there are some that really do. Do you have examples of the ones that like really don't? Because I'm curious, like what's drawing that line? If that's sort of is that a case where there's a tone thing in the game, a narrative thing, or a gameplay genre, or is it just vibes? Is it just some games have vibes that don't want guests? Because if I had to take a guess, yeah, those are the games I was expecting you'd say. Uh, right. If I had to take a guess, I would say the ones like you don't want guests on are, Scabma, Inuwa, and Blackhaven. Especially Scotma and Inua. And Never Allowed. Right. Which that's an interesting one. Because that's like. Look, I've got a. I phrase this as, I guess, vulnerable games. Uh, these games are highly personal. So, Inua is the one set in Alaska, yes. About the time travel one with the horror and the terror, or the terror and the Erebus. Yes. Um, that checks out. That checks out to me. Really specific. Right. So, these are games that we approach of learning from, not right. So the games that historically I've approached from a perspective of humility and being like, the game knows more than I do, right? We can maybe talk about a few things in the game from a historian's perspective, but by and large, right, this is a game that is representing a thing that I, with my positionality as a relatively straight, cis, white man, who is from a middle class background in the United States, just does not have access to. But from a perspective that is not mine. And the goal is to celebrate that game and to let the game present that experience and to honestly accept that experience. Right, and so, right, we can talk about some narrative ideas here, some things where I think the game works, where the game doesn't work, but at the core of it, that's a place of we want to celebrate the game and learn from it. So now, Raptors and anyone else in chat, here's the interesting question. For a game like Scabma, if we were able to have a developer join us for that, would that would that change things? If the guest was someone who helped create the game, would that change how you feel about having a guest on for that game? Or for, I don't know, if another game comes out, I guess, I don't know, if we were to play a game like When Rivers Were Trails, right, a game about the United States dispossession of the Anishinaabe, and we were able to get someone who is actually Anishinaabe or Chedishakoing or Crow, right? If we were to get someone from one of the relevant tribes as a guest on, even in the first playthrough, does that change things? Right? Even if it's not a developer, but if it's someone from the culture the game is by and about, does that change things? You'd still want that as a replay. Interesting. Noted. Alright. We gotta see how the game does things and revisit it with more perspectives and more people. Interesting. Good to know. There's some games that just want that breathing room. Alright. Yeah. Good to know. Next question on the guess. It's like watching a movie in the theater first and afterwards watching it with friends and like opening commentary, director's notes, etc. Got it, yeah. I totally vibe with that. One thing that's potentially difficult with that is just, you know, the game industry needs to chill. But, right, if that's something that we prefer, with the idea that, you know, maybe we don't try and hit up every major new release, but instead we may, like, revisit games that we already played and let rest for a bit. Like, if that's something you're interested in, that's something we definitely look into doing. Just, you know, let's make that the next topic. Chat, I have very little spare time, and honestly, it's going to get less before it gets more. So, let's take that with a grain of salt, right? Certainly in the very short term, right? There's not... like the next 3 months, I'm gonna be in trouble, or really have fairly limited spare time, and that means we may only be streaming twice a week or streaming shorter streams, just because there's some big projects that I've got to focus on. It may, one way or another, we'll figure something else out, but for March and April here, just a heads up, things may be getting more limited, or getting a little bit more sort of crunched. To that end, are we playing new games or are we revisiting our backlog? Like, you know, today happens to be the release day for Wo Long Fallen Dynasty. Team Ninja's game. That's a dark fantasy action game set in the Three Kingdoms period. We're not gonna have time to pick it up. Is that out today? Yeah. That's out today. But I just don't have budget and I don't have time to make that happen right now. So that game's not happening. So yeah, the question is, right, from the perspective of what do you want, do you want us to be focusing in on, you know, a bunch of, like, new games, or do you want us to, like, look back, play some older games, do some things? Time to do all the things? Look, there is a third option. There is a third option. And that is, everyone hits that subscribe button right now, and we raise enough money that I can start doing this full time, and eventually start getting other people involved. Then we'll still not have enough time, but we'll have more time. We'll be closer. Both, but in a balance. All right. Third option, Adam becomes a 24/7 streamer. Look, just get that coffee IV. Just go. When you play newer games, you might get more new followers because the algorithm probably likes new games. This is true. There are people, now, the flip side to this is that there are people on Twitch who camp their favorite games and literally will just, almost every day, check to see if anyone is playing that particular game and show up. When I was playing Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War, an SNES game from, what, 94? There were people who showed up and were super enthusiastic, super on board, and who I have never seen again. And that's great for them. Like, love that for them. They are appreciated even if they show up for just one game. But that is a thing to know, is that if you play games that have staying power, there are audiences who will just camp those and will show up for them, and it's very fun. If we have something new to say about an old game or a guest to revisit it with new eyes, that should get priority. Interesting. That's helpful. You're kind of the same with Pentiment, but that's also because you're generally just too busy to visit streams now. And that happens, right? People's lives are busy. My life is certainly busy enough. It's not a big deal, right? It's kind of an inevitable feature that some people will show up just because they're interested in the game, and not because they're interested in the mission of the channel. That's fine. Like, I am never bothered by that. Okay, well, never is a strong word, but I train really hard to not be bothered by that because, you know, finding that right combination of someone with a vibe you want, doing content that you find is interesting about a game you find is interesting, is just kind of a sweet spot. You'll only be interested in the games you made yourself, such as your ego. Yeah, look, no shade on that. We all need a little bit of a healthy ego. But also, right, the fact that you're here now, send me your next project. Clearly the answer here is just send me your next project. But no, right, however often you're able to make it is super appreciated. And Pentiment was great, because, right, the vibe, the expertise, the vibe, and the excitement for the game all really coalesced in a way that just worked really nicely for feeling good about what I was making, and also, right, getting a bunch of lovely people around. Oh, thank you, JCDC, for the gifted sub to the air support. Thank you so much. But right, the lesson there is just, you're right, however often you drop by, you're super welcome. We love having you around. Uh, and we love that you participate whenever you are around. So, what I'm hearing though, on this topic is basically for the short term. We want to look at maybe, right, go a little. While there's slightly fewer big releases, we want to look at revisiting some older games. Is it Assassin's Creed time again? Is that what's happening? Is that? God damn it! Is it because it's Mirage isn't releasing until who knows when. I thought it was going to be releasing earlier in the year. It's not. They haven't announced a release date yet, so we're looking pretty late in the year probably for Mirage. So there may need to be another Assassin's Creed game in between. But yeah, but yo, related question. Right, I've been talking a little bit about trying to do like a World War One themed month, where, oh, thank you, JCDC. Providing so much fun and new knowledge since you can finally afford it. Thanks for all the enthusiasm and fun. Aw. That warms my heart right there. That's why I do this. Uh, yeah, chat. What, what's the energy there? Like I've been talking about doing like a World War One themed month where we do play quite a few games, that present World War One in different ways. Now, I haven't had time to do functionally any research into, World War One. God, that's only 500 to 800 years before when I specialize, or after when I specialize in. But, right, is that something that you'd be interested in terms of like content strategy? Is the idea that like we spend a chunk of time where we play a bunch of games from across the history of gaming that all share like a historical setting or historical theme, and we explore how different creative projects have approached the same topic. Like that's something that feels very on brand for the channel. It's just something that requires a lot of research, and also is very different, right? Look, if I was doing a World War One or World War Two month, I'd be doing a World War Two year. So we're gonna not do that. But yeah, try and pick periods that make, and then explore how different games sort of tackle them, and what sort of shows up from that. It could either be very good or very depressing. Exactly. Year of the Wave 2K24. Exactly. The other thing that's different about a themed month is that we wouldn't be finishing playthroughs of most of these games. That's something that you all have previously expressed interest in, is liking the more long form, go through an entire game, take it seriously across its entire game. That's something that would not be possible in a themed month, because there would be too many games and not enough time. So that's sort of the trade-off there. But if that's something you all are interested in, yeah, we'll try and experiment with that in like, I was going to say April. Realistically, I need to do some more reading, so probably, I don't know, June? It may not be until June. God, I hate that. But you don't think that's super worth it? Interesting. Which part of it could you elaborate on that, Leander? Like, I value your opinion. Well, We have to plan around what upcoming games you actively want to play. Exactly. Right now, I think we are in a little bit of a lull, where there's some more indie stuff coming out, but not any super high budget releases. Uh, well, that means we may be able to visit some more like fun chill games. Like, I mean, I've been playing Season. Season's been great. We should be coming close-ish to the end of Season. Um, but that game rules. Uh, but yeah, right. Like World War One month is not going to be based around any particularly new one. Maybe something like when an anniversary Memorial Day comes up. Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's a sort of as I have time Leander. Uh, ooh, that's an interesting idea. When is Armistice Day? November. No. Waiting until November for it doesn't sound super worth either. But maybe I don't know. Maybe May makes that. That was a sentence. Maybe May makes sense. Blah, 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 blah. That definitely lost all sense of meaning. Uh, but around like in the U.S., Memorial Day is in May, and so I don't know. Maybe doing something in like late May, early June, around World War One, around Memorial Day, maybe makes sense. That feels like a good well. That sounds like a good time frame to be worth experimenting with it. Even though World War One is not Memorial Day specific, right? Veterans Day is, and Armistice Day are the World War One ones. But still, that also gives me some time, right? Because my big projects finish up in like very early May, so I'd have a couple weeks to get sorted. I'd have to, yeah, that might work. It would definitely help with comparisons, right? Right. The theme month is kind of the spin-off here of the wanting to schedule games concurrently, right? That's kind of the way to structure that a little bit more while providing a more coherent instead of just let's cannibalize a new release to actually be able to explore something. I think that works. I think that maybe makes more sense like a content strategy. So we can experiment with this. Let's plan on that. Experimenting on something late May, early June, and then we can evaluate that. And if that we're like that went horribly, we can just never try it again. And if we're like no, that went really well, we can start plotting out other ones that might be fun to do. Dynamo. Is that where I just like borrow people for a month and be like, paleo games time. Raptoros, I know you are immediately on board with that. I make no promises. Setting up that work would be time consuming, and I have to work around a lot of other people because I don't have that subject expertise. KJ, super don't worry about it. It is what? Like 1 in the afternoon? It's right after. There it is! So, what's up next? Oh, yeah. Do y'all want to see multiplayer games? This is something I've been, like, thinking about very experimentally for a while. So, here's the disclosure for this. Minecraft's next update introduces new tools and new terrain and new items for archaeology. random bullshit update. Woo! Exactly. Right. So is all of history and archaeology Twitch about to become Minecraft streamers? Right. We've experimented with it a little bit. Right. We've not done a lot of multiplayer stuff. We did a little bit though. Right. When Sarah Nell and I played Valheim, right, Chen, if you were around for that, how did you like that sort of multi-stream setup where Sarah Nell and I were actually playing together? Yeah, Raptorus, we did do Hood, Outlaws and Legends, but we did it where, like, I was the only person streaming, right? We were going into groups with randos. This would be thinking much more like getting guests on, either other streamers or matter experts, and then we play in a multiplayer lobby or multiplayer server and hang out and spout random nonsense while playing a game together. You like the collab and discussion with other players who are guests? Yeah. And we tried a little bit. We experimented with community tribes of Midgard. Right. Those would be our kind of 2 experiments into multiplayer. Thus far. Is that something you want? Or that very, very freeform, very chill, spout random nonsense, panic about trolls? Potentially, right, with the getting folks from the Archeo Gaming Collective on, what is it? Yeah. Archaeology Tube, Dr. Bill Farley, getting Bill back on would be great. Right, Sarah Nell, the folks over at Value Foundation, over in Leiden. Right. Those are the time zones that I know people who stream historical content. Oh yeah, I also was it. It's not. It's Greenwich Mean Time. That's what it is. Folks I know who stream historical content on Twitch, that I know what time zone they're from. That's the time zone spread. I think it's close to 11. You know how garbage that distribution is? Hooray, we have a global community. Boo, none of us can ever show up in each other's streams because, good lord, those time zones. The time zones are so that's always the trouble with multiplayer stuff, is that coordinating the time zones to make sure that we're all alive and functional. It's currently 2 o'clock in my time zone. So that's what? 6 p.m. in the... No, that's incorrect. I'm bad. This is -5. This is -8. right? Because it's what 7 p.m. in the UK, 8 p.m. in Europe right now, and like 2 or 3 in the morning in Australia. And like 11 a.m. in Seattle. It's 8 o'clock in Germany. Perfect. Yeah. So yeah, 6 hour difference from GMT -5 to GMT +1. Yep. There we go. I corrected my forgetfulness of time zones. 9 p.m. In the 9 p.m. over where you are. Yeah. So yeah, that checks out. And yeah, Australia's like 12 hours off from me. So just good luck. Yeah. GMT +2. So yeah. And it should be about 11 a.m. in California and the West Coast. Yeah. Yeah. So, obviously, coordinating that, especially among other content creators, going to be super difficult. Coordinating it among bleh. Coordinating it among more general guests is definitely doable. If that's something you're interested in looking at multiplayer games specifically as a potential option, that's something that's good to know. It's something I don't normally play, right? I normally don't play multiplayer games very often, but if that's something folks are interested in, that's something that we can super look at in the like medium term, especially over the summer, trying to set that up and get some sort of like regular event going. So what's the verdict, yay or nay? I suspect the verdict, as with most of my suggestions, are yay, that sounds fun. That's almost always the verdict. I've gotten used to it by now. Yay, that sounds fun. Thank you, Blues. Love to do multiplayer Minecraft archaeology. I also know some other folks are already interested with that. Right. I already know some folks are interested with that. I already pitched it to Angus over at Value Foundation, and immediately was like, that sounds fun. So if I can get them, or some of the Value folks, plus Bill, plus some of the folks at the Arco Gaming Collective, plus me, honestly, if we can just get them, right, get that East Coast Euro collective, maybe get someone like Stee on as well, and try and like build that community. Because here's the benefit I think about this. Right, one of the things I am super interested in, and to do with here we start looking at like the long term. Actually, let's put this in our medium term goals. Let's see. Projects that promote community building between creator. This might sound a little bit corporate-y, like CV resume language, but that's because it is. Yeah, I find that's helpful to like really precisely articulate what the thing is. While giving some flexibility of what that actually looks like and means. Oh yeah, short-term things. Merge. experiment with format, and time periods to promote. How do I want to say that? Experiment with format and time periods to promote a broader than medieval I don't know, something nonsense, right? The medium term, right, is I want to do more collaborative, like more fully collaborative stuff. Right, having guests on, right, that's sort of holding the course, right? Continue having productive, conversations with guests of diverse backgrounds. Can you give a sneak peek, a general idea you have for the merch? I don't have any full designs, but this first run is going to be all based on our Twitch emotes. So, in particular, let's see if I can, I don't really have a good way to make the mock-up here, but I can certainly try. So, the idea, basically, sorry, I have clicked off of OBS, so I cannot see any of you. In particular, our little guy is going to be a super useful one, for our merch. But yeah, so the idea basically is that we're going to have some shirts, we're going to have some sticker packs, and I think we can probably do mugs as well. This first wave, it all has to be stuff that can print on demand, because if we're honest, the community isn't large enough to deal with, like, I can't absorb the storage costs. Right, so it all has to be print on demand, which affects the way that works a little bit. But the idea is, my idea, and we'll have to see, I have to get in contact with folks still at the companies to see if that's possible. Dynamite Monkey is not currently in the shark group, because the idea is I want to be relatively subtle. So, right, let me just pull up, just like an example. Right, so there's like a meme out of, like, you know, Pocket Cat. So you have just a t-shirt with a breast pocket, and then there's a design that pokes out of the pocket. And, you know, the meme is that it's a cat that's flipping people off. But what we're gonna do, instead, if I can make it work, is that I want a version that is sticking out of our pocket is our little memento mori. And then another one that is the Virgin Mary, but with a Glock, hiding inside the pocket. Right, so it just looks like normal Virgin Mary sticking out of the pocket, and then you pull it down and she's got a Glock. Oh no! And then, probably down on the, like, the bottom edge, just have the full version of the logo as you see it here, so the full Ludo history for the branding, either on the sleeve or on the bottom edge of the shirt. So generally keeping it somewhat, right, pretty subtle, because, you know, that matches what I wear. I'll be honest, I don't like super loud graphic tees. I don't really see, like, lots of folks wearing merch, like big loud merch tees, very often. So my idea is create something a little bit more subtle that still very much reflects the channel as far as the glibness. So I mean, still obviously branded in that it's got the Ludo history quite clearly. But you know, the attention is mostly to this very nice joke. Create something that's comfortable to wear, right? Create something that's comfortable to wear that is a nice in joke and is actually wearable. Exactly. Right? YouTuber merch generally isn't wearable, and that kind of defeats the point of having merch if you never feel like you can wear it. So I need to get in contact with some folks to see what companies, if any, are able to make that happen, and what the sort of price points are going to be. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen here still. They're still early days. But that's where my ideas are at. And then the sticker packs are easy, because you get one that is, again, just the Ludo history sticker, right? The brand is a sticker. The brand logo as a sticker. And then gets you some of these emotes, including the owl with cool glasses, to put on your stuff. USP has over 2 million subs, and I've known them for years, and I still wouldn't wear them or something, right? I'll wear like their Red's Odin design shirt because it's super comfy, and also the design is at the center. But just like their face, nah, not happening. And I know them IRL. They're my friends. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at merch-wise. It's no longer available. It was when the Odin video came out for like Christmas like 5 years ago. But yeah, at this point we need to keep it pretty. It's going to be pretty basic because, let's be honest, the demand is not super high, right? Like you all are all lovely, and I want to create things that like you all are excited about, um, and that you all like will actually get use out of. The the trick is though, right, storage overheads might completely make this unviable if I get too ambitious too quickly. So we're sticking pretty basic, a nice simple run, some shirts, some stickers. We'll see how the mugs work. But yeah, we'll stick it there, and then see how that goes. And then if it turns out there's way more demand than I expected, we can look at developing some more merch, creating new runs of stuff, seeing what happens. Yeah. All right. So, you know, there's one more big topic I want to talk about with y'all. Let's see. So the short-term stuff here, I think, is a lot of holding the course at the moment, because I'm just, like, my personal life is about to be in a moment of transition and crunch, so I expect that'll ease up in May, and then after that, we can start getting more ambitious as we go into the summer. So the very short term is looking very much at holding the course, and then try and develop more things over the summer. Medium term, right? One of the things I really want to do is develop things that promote community building between creators. Right, having guests on of academic backgrounds is great. I super enjoy it. But I also want to look at thinking about, you know, history on Twitch as an ecosystem at large, rather than a bunch of isolated creators. I think it's finally at a point where there's enough people in the space to do that, and the trick is just getting us all to regularly work together. That's difficult because we all live around the world, but that's something I want to try and do more of in the next roughly 1 year. So we'll see how that goes. Because I think it's fun, right? I worked with Sophie Quest a few times, had a great time. Steve sometimes regularly comes, right? So pretty regularly raids us, and it's super fun. We haven't been over to Steve's channel in a good long while, but Steve's super cool. an Irish streamer who works in classical archaeology. Does a lot of like Planet Zoo stuff. Like had a big project of building ancient Athens in Planet Zoo. Please don't overwork yourself. Don't worry about that. That part of it I'm actually not super worried about, because this is right. None of these things are like huge time commitments. They're just things that we need to actually commit to. And I don't know, right? There's frameworks of what I've seen called aspirational labor, right? Because look, the last topic we need to talk about is just monetization and sustainability. Um, but insofar as I have energy around work and finding a more sustainable job, uh, right, this is something that gives me a lot of energy, and so building work to kind of make this more sustainable and make it more likely that I can do this as a bigger part of my income and start bringing other people on board, you know, something that I think is worthwhile. Um, Other medium-term goals, though. In the next year, I want to get back into making edited content. There's going to be one that I can guarantee is going to come out May or June, because it's one of the projects that's causing me crunch right now. Super experimental stuff. We'll see how it does on the channel, but I want to get back into making edited content, making sure all that happens. So get hype. The goal is probably to just try and start small, including the one I'm currently working on. Make 3 edited videos by year's end. So start small, start modest, but try and create 3 things, adding up to like roughly an hour of edited content that I feel really good about. And then from there, hopefully build some momentum to continue making those sort of more tightly argued edited ideas. I think that's a super worthwhile thing. That's a thing that I regularly hear people are interested in. It's something I just haven't had any time to work on, so the goal is to try and carve out the time to make that happen. And then long term, right, the super long thing. As I said at the beginning, I am Adam. I am not Ludo History. Regardless of what most people tends to say, my name is not Ludo History. My pseudonym is not Ludo History. I'm Adam. I'm open about my background. My expertise is kind of a feature of the channel. What that means is that what I want for Ludo History is at some point, God knows when this will happen, but at some point, to be able to sort of share the creative control of the channel in a much more full way. Like right now, the only person who earns any income thanks to your all generosities from it is me. Guests, I don't have any budget to pay guests. That's an important thing. Right, as we start getting more ambitious with guests and asking more of our guests, I want to be able to pay them, right, to thank them for their time with at least a nominal thank you. And also, as we get back into edited content, if I want to start getting editors, right, other people to help out with producing that sort of content, and in a somewhat substantive way, eventually, I want to, not be the only person making content on this channel. Here on Twitch. Because my ultimate ideal pie-in-the-sky thing is that I want Ludo History to be effectively a media company, right? Not a big media company, that's never going to happen, but a historically focused media company. That is able to bring in guest writers, guest streamers, have people involved more regularly and more substantially, making content around historical media, historical fiction, historical games, all of that stuff. I mean, that might be 10 or 15 years down the road, God willing, But that's what that's the direction I want the channel to work towards, is to be able to be like, hey, you know, someone's got a pitch for wanting to just, you're gonna be honest, that sounds awesome. Exactly, right? That's an idea that sounds really cool to me. If I can make that happen, I will have succeeded in my wildest ambitions. There's a lot that needs to happen in order to get there. This is extreme long term. There's a lot of steps to try and make that happen, and there's a lot of channel growth that needs to happen. There's a lot of finding sponsorships, finding ways to make that sustainable. But I don't know if Emmett say is like, hey, I got a project around Irish mythology that I want to do. Great. Here is a bunch of resources to help you make that happen. Go forth. We've got the institutional expertise in order to help make that sparkle and to host that, and you get compensated, profit sharing, whatever. So the idea is you get a bunch of folks on that are interested in this and can make an actual collective. Right? Not something of, oh, all the profit flows to me, I am the capitalist, but an actual, collective where there's a few of us that could, survive relatively comfortably off of making digital historical media criticism. It's a super ambitious idea. I don't know that this will ever pan out. But that is the direction I want to go. Based off your guys' response here, it sounds like y'all are excited by that idea. And so I think, right, as we think long term, that's the goal, is to build up something sustainable enough that you can start bringing on more people, producers, right, editors, and other hosts to start kind of sharing the channel and having a high level of buy-in to these missions and succeed in that in a radically collaborative sense. So, right, to that end, I think these short and medium medium-term goals are important steps to start doing that, in that creating ties between other ecosystems, making other stuff happen. Partially is raising the profile of the channel enough that people will start associating us with that anyway. Partly that's about attracting a larger audience so that we can get, more funding, grants, whatever. And part of that is establish a framework and documentation of collaboration enough that we're able to begin adding pieces to it without the whole thing collapsing. Super long term, but that feels like a good direction for the channel to go, right? You are hearing people walking outside my door, JC. I do not have a pet, to my regret. You are just hearing the fact that I live regrettably close to the out of doors, and people walking by. So, there is one last thing we actually need to talk about then. I do have the pet who is in my ceiling who is a rodent, but that was not them. That was not the pet in my ceiling who is a rodent. That was just someone walking by. So this is the last thing we need to talk about. Right? Here are some crunchy numbers. That's my budget. In March of 2023, that is my budget. for the number of hours I spend on the channel, right, there's a lot of aspirational labor going on. Labor that does not get paid, labor that does not transfer to sustainability. It's 170, like, I get paid cents on the hour of labor, basically. That's fine, right? That is okay. But as we think about the super long term goals, that's not something that's going to be able. At some point, that has to change, right? Now, right, there's a few ways to do that, right? So, at this stage, right, the needs of the channel are actually pretty low. Certainly, I'd like to earn more because that would give me more flexibility to do more projects. But the actual budgetary needs of the channel are quite low. So, that's okay. The question is, working with you guys, right? I don't want to just like impose things on you. Hey streamer, please give Prime subs. Hey streamer. Right, that is an inevitable part of the ecosystem. On the same vein, right, the Patreon is an inevitable part of the ecosystem. And to a large extent, what we're able to do in the short and medium term is going to continue to be dictated by the support you all give. Right? Now, I want that support to be, investing in something that you get stuff out of. And I certainly do not want you to do more than you can afford. Absolutely not. Don't do that. But to a significant extent, what I'm able to do is based on what resource we have available. Oh, and thank you, Marco, for the follow just now. I do super duper appreciate it. We're talking about the future of the channel direction if you're just tuning in. Right, this whole stream has been sort of an introduction to the channel and talking about what sorts of things we want to see going forward to help me set priorities and help get everyone excited for what potentials are out there. So, glad to have you here, even though you came in as we're talking about the rubbish nonsense of having to make money. How dare we? So, let's put in some notes here. Now, this is the problem with subs. Subs are easy and super cool, but Twitch does take a 50% cut. Jeff Bezos takes a lot of money out of your Twitch subs. So those $5 paid subs, I usually get about $2 to $2.50 for them. Yeah. Patreon. Currently, the Patreon setup is $2, $10, and $25 a month. $2 just gets your name. Right. No, JCDC, it's totally fine. Right, Twitch subs are an incredibly important tool. Right. Don't worry. That was intentional. On that other screen that I flashed, I just realized the microphone is not set up on that scene. Oops. But on that scene, right, that $2 Patreon sub gets you over there. At $10, you get that, plus you get to determine an emote. Right? All those delightful medieval marginalia that Twitch subs get access to, our $10 Patreon subs get to add new ones to it. So, get to swap stuff out. And then $25 basically subsidizes me purchasing whatever game you want me to play. Right? At that $25 a month tier, you recommend a game, and I'm going to play it as soon as reasonable, and spend some good long time with it, get some good thoughts, and then when I get back into edited content, make edited content about that game. So, that being said, currently, this tier has nobody, we did have people in the past, so, but here's the question, right? Is this priced too high? Right? What would be tiers and rewards that would get people interested in this? Now, to some extent, right, this is just pure finances. If you're not interested, you're not interested. That's fine, that happens. But if we're talking about, right, wanting to get sort of crowdfunded ways of making that happen, like, what's actually a reasonable price point for some of this stuff that makes people feel good? Issue is just sustaining, right? So, I feel it. I'm also there. So, that's relevant information, right? The fact that right now, what that actually means, right, is that potentially the crowdfunded solutions here at the current point of the channel is not going to be a super sustainable option. It's certainly my preferred option because that imposes the least on people. Right, that's not like, oh, now I have to deal with Raid Shadow Legends sponsorships, or NordVPN every day, all day, every day. Right, if we can get away from doing that, I don't want to be doing, like, super NordVPN sponsorships, trying to deal with that sponsorship scene as much as possible. But, right, these ones... These ones are sort of our most crowdfunded, our most democratized options for income. And so I just want to reiterate, right, if we want to start getting more ambitious, working towards those long-term goals, that support is super duper important. The goal is to never paywall this, right? The goal is to never ever have to paywall this. But at the same time, thinking about like long-term sustainability and the ability to continue doing this, we do need to think honestly and carefully about monetization. A $5 tier might be an option. Alright. That's good to know. I will look into what would be like a decent reward for that, or a decent incentive for that, to really try and make that happen. Other monetization options, right, is ads. Right? So, if I run at least 3 minutes of ads per hour on Twitch, I get a much higher cut of ad revenue. Right? So, what is it? I think it's a 55-45 split on Twitch for less than 3 minutes per hour. It's a 70-30 split for 3+ minutes per hour. So an option would be that I turn up the frequency of ads and then we try and just like build in ad breaks into the content we're doing so that it doesn't surprise people. The problem is Twitch has a bad habit of surprising people with ads, right? Chat, how many of you have been annoyed where ads just show up in the middle of a sentence and it's just like 8 minutes, it's like 8 ads in a row and it sucks? Hi, I've been there. Patreon is a much better split on Twitch subs. Right, if you only have $5 a month to throw at the channel, throwing it towards Patreon is a much better price point. Much better value for your buck. than Twitch subs. Twitch subs give you access to those fun emotes, which is great, the nice badges next to your name, and they boost the algorithm, right? The benefit of Twitch subs, but you get emotes, and it boosts the channel in Twitch's algorithms. Patreon, better revenue split. I get about 22 bucks. I get about 22 bucks if you do the $25 tier. I get about $1.60 out of every $2 Patreon subscription. I get about $1.60 of it. Yeah, right, the reason why I don't have like a $1 tier is that I get about 60 cents on a dollar, and I get $1.60 out of $2. So there's like 40 cents that just disappears on the $1 tier. So yeah, right, turning up the ads can be an option to increase revenue. Cons, but small audience, exactly, right? Since I don't really have a good way to... For the type of content we make, I'm not able to really guarantee consistent ad breaks, and Twitch is just going to decide when it wants to run ads. And so people are just going to get completely screwed over by ads, and there's not a lot I can do. So that's an issue, right? That's the difficulty with ads. See, I can try to do that, but then it just splits everyone up. What it should, right, if I were to do ad breaks, what I'd want to try and bully them into setting it up is that it's basically, we stream for 57 minutes, and it's like, hey, we're at 57 minutes, we're going to take an ad break while I go get some more water, we'll be back soon. 3 minutes later, we're back. That would be the better way to do it, so that it's, you know, especially if there's a guest on, it can be like, we're pausing, ad break, let's resume. So content, commercial break, content. Much more televised thing. That's something that audiences tend to not super like, but for the style of content we do, that makes more sense. The problem is, Twitch will often ignore me saying, hey, do the ad break here, and it may not be a conducive stopping point on every 57 minutes, right? So Twitch will often ignore me and just kind of run ads whenever it wants, which is bad. I can't guarantee that we're always at a good stopping point when we hit an ad break, and the small audience size means that if someone walks in during ads, they may just walk right back out. So it's something worth considering. If that's something you're open to, I can look into experimenting with that to see what options work better and what the actual impact is on revenue for that. I make about $1 on ads a day, between like 40 cents and $1 on ads per day. So turning that up should theoretically about quadruple that, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Other options for monetization. Sponsorships. Now, the type of content we're doing, right, there's not a lot of people offering sponsorships for this sort of thing. Exactly. Yeah, I need to create a Be Right Back thing, which is easy to do. But yeah, it's entirely a matter of, it's primarily a matter of getting Twitch's ad algorithm to actually pay attention to me when I say, do it at this time. But yeah, the sponsorships are kind of an issue, because, right, they have decent payouts, but sponsorships don't entirely fit like, they don't really fit neatly into uh, the mission and values in the way that the other ones kind of do, right? They don't really partnering. Needing to make sure I partner with companies that I actually support and like is difficult. Two, setting up sponsorships is a lot of time and labor. And three, everyone hates Raid Shadow Legends. Let's not pretend otherwise. They pay extremely well, but no one really wants to hear me shill for them. So, I don't know if that's an option we particularly want. Next option, grants. Exactly, it is a little bit, right, this is, sponsorships are very much a deal with the devil, so I'm not super keen on doing those, but, if that's something you all would be okay with, it's something I might look into in the medium term as sort of a way to make the thing more sustainable. The last option is grants. Grants are like the long-term, sort of optimal one to create a big injection of funds for a specific project, for potentially like a lot of the overhead of wanting to professionalize Ludo history into an actual business. The grant funds might be a good way to make that happen. Problem is, nobody is handing out grants for a project like this at the moment. I've actually looked into this to see if there's anything I can just kind of throw an application towards. There's not. But realistically, right, what this is long term is looking for like NEH or NEA funds, National Endowment for the Humanities, National Endowment for the Arts funds, and see if freaking they have any interest in throwing money towards independent media criticism projects. That's a very long-term thing, though. In the short to medium term, thinking about the next couple of years, that's probably not super viable. But there are serious benefits towards looking at grant funding, and if anyone does happen to see any grants that would actually be for digital projects like this, do let us know, because that could be helpful. Especially long term. So yeah, that thinks about that suggests our monetization options. What it sounds like is we should look at increasing the frequency of ads. If I can find a way to do that. Oh yeah, merch. I'll have to, right, the question is what's the realistic price point on merch and how much money do we actually get from that? That's something we'll find out together, but I'm certainly welcome to input on that. But yeah, sounds like this. Sounds like keep looking at this. And yeah, right, the Twitch subs and bits, right, the big benefit for them is that they boost the algorithm, which is more visibility on platform for the channel. Patreon has the best revenue split, but obviously the audience skews young and making a lot of cash on this. Like, the only history creator who makes a lot, enough to live on cash that I know of just off of Patreon is Brett Devereaux. And then if we can get Twitch to behave, upping the number of ads and frequency of ads might be something the community seems on board with. So, right, I think that gives us some options for immediate ways to experiment with revenue to come up with more sustainability. Because, right, the expenses coming up, obviously beyond new games, I want to get a better webcam so I don't have to keep using my phone. Eventually I want to get an actual, right, I'm currently streaming off a laptop, and while it's a beefy laptop, I want to be able to upgrade to a tower and be able to do that. And then also, I have to make rent and bills. And so, as I look at having to move in the next 6 months, being able to upgrade instead of downgrade would be pretty helpful. But we'll see. We make do with what we need to make do. What about opening direct stream donations in combination with something like TTS? Stream donations are open. They should be able to do donations through Streamlabs. I don't have TTS on. From other streamers, it seems like that, especially as communities grow, that can often be used for spam, which is very funny as a joke, but could get very frustrating. But yeah, it's something we can look at. But yeah, right, direct donations, if you just want to do a one-time donation, there actually is a link on the About section through Streamlabs to do direct donations. So if that's an option, right, if you're like, hey, I can't do Patreon right now, but I just want to give you like $20, that option is incredibly appreciated and 100% open. I can look into integrating TTS if that's something folks want. But I don't currently have that set up. What's the vibe there, chat? Like, I've not really thought about TTS so far, because I don't know, women holding hands, 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 is a far too frequent TTS donation, and in a media criticism rather than just kind of memeing around stream context, that could be weird. But also, we don't have a standard. We 100% don't have a standard community, right? And so I don't know. As an option of a sort of either right with cheering to either cause questions to pop up or asking questions through TTS might be super duper interesting. Yeah. That's something we can look into. Thank you for that suggestion. I super appreciate it. Alright. So, we are basically out of time. I have to run off to work in soon. So, we're going to have to call the stream here. Thank you for, sitting with a PowerPoint. 17 to 20 people for the last hour have sat and watched me type in a PowerPoint while rambling. But what I hope this does is first, give you an idea of where I'm at, right? As we are rolling out new branding, new overlays, new sorts of stuff, that hopefully gives you an idea of what direction I'm trying to point the channel towards, and hopefully it's one you all agree with. Right, because one of the pillars of this community is the idea that it's not me working to just provide content for you, but it is a collective us, and it is a collective us in a way that internet ecosystems really don't like. And so being able to be that sort of radically collaborative option and work together towards some of these long-term goals is something I care very deeply about, and I'm glad to see folks seem enthusiastic about that, and those sort of very long-term goals, like some of the ideas we have floating around. So yeah, and thank you all for the contributions, whether following, chatting, offering feedback and advice, or subscribing, gifting subs. It is incredibly appreciated. It's what makes this continue to be possible. Right? In a very substantive way, your all's participation is what makes this work. So I am super grateful to all of you for that. If you like this, do make sure you invite friends. Right? I want to have more people who buy into this vision come join the community. So definitely come do that. And also, as we start thinking about doing more things that matter, make sure you come in on Sunday. Because Sunday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, it's a bit late in the evening, it's 10:30 p.m. European Time, so I know it's quite late, but we're going to be doing an Assassin's Creed 1 Discovery Tour as part of the Assassin's Creed Community Relief Project. They're raising money for Save the Children for earthquake relief in Turkey and Syria. And as we are participating in that on Sunday, raising money for charity. They've raised almost $20,000 for Save the Children right now, and we want to help contribute to that. So make sure y'all tune in for that. We've got some great research coming on for that, and I'm really trying to make a super polished presentation there. I'm excited for it. You all should be too. So hopefully I'll see you all then, and then whatever we're doing next week, I haven't figured it out yet. We'll figure it out on Sunday. But whatever we're doing next, and whenever I see you next, thank you all so much, and until then, I hope you'll have a good rest of your evenings, alright? Bye-bye now. And Billy Warren, finally, with the insert witty late message here. Thank you for that tier 1 subscription.